She had exactly 11% battery left on her phone. 11%. Just enough to call her daughter's school if there was an emergency. Just enough to check the bus schedule one more time before the rain got worse. And standing in front of her, soaked through his torn brown jacket, was a homeless black man with tears in his eyes, holding out a dead phone with a cracked screen, begging her to let him make one call. 3 people had already refused him. A businessman in a suit had walked past him like he didn't exist. A young woman had clutched her purse tighter and crossed the street. A father with a stroller had actually laughed. And now, Mary Okafor, a 34-year-old home health aide from Brooklyn, single mother of a 9-year-old girl, a woman who made $22,000 a year and counted every single cent. Mary was the 4th person he asked. What Mary did not know, what nobody at that bus stop on that cold October evening in Brooklyn could possibly have known, was that the man in front of her was holding a $2.4 million invention inside his head. And in exactly 47 minutes, that invention would be stolen from him forever if he did not make one single phone call. She did not know he was an engineer. She did not know he had graduated from MIT. She did not know the CEO of a billion-dollar company was, at that very moment, sitting in a leather chair in Manhattan, watching a clock, waiting for a deadline to expire so he could claim credit for something that had never been his. All Mary Okafor knew was that 4 years ago, her husband Terrence had died in a car accident because his phone battery was dead and he could not call 911. 17 minutes. That is how long Terrence lay in that ditch before another driver finally saw him. 17 minutes that broke Mary in a way she never fully recovered from. And so, Mary had made a promise, a private, sacred promise, that she would never, ever refuse a stranger who needed a phone. Not once, not ever. Because she knew, better than anyone alive, what happens when a call does not go through. She handed him the phone. 11% battery. And what happened in the next 4 minutes would change both of their lives forever. Expose a scandal that would reach the front page of the New York Times. Force a Fortune 500 CEO to resign in disgrace. And open a door that neither Mary nor the stranger in front of her ever imagined could exist. This is a true story. And if you stay with me until the end, I promise you will never look at a stranger asking for help the same way again. Mary Okafor woke up every morning at 4:45, not 4:30, because that felt too early and made her tired for the whole day. Not 5, because that made her rushed. 4:45 was the exact minute that gave her enough time to make coffee, sit for 10 quiet minutes at her small kitchen table in the 2-bedroom apartment in East Flatbush, and remind herself, out loud, that today she was going to keep her promise. The apartment had thin walls and thinner heating. In October, the radiator clanked like it was angry at the world, and Mary had learned to fall asleep to that sound the way other people fall asleep to rain. She lived on the 3rd floor of a walk-up above a Caribbean bakery, and every morning at 5, the smell of cocoa bread and hard dough would rise through the floor vents and fill her tiny kitchen. It was the closest thing to a good morning she got. At 5:30, she would gently wake her daughter Aisha, 9 years old, tall for her age, with her father Terrence's exact eyes, deep brown, patient, always looking at Mary like she already knew something Mary did not. Aisha never complained about being woken up early. She had never known any other kind of morning. Mary worked as a home health aide for an agency called Bright Days Care Services. Her clients were mostly elderly, mostly black, mostly forgotten. She was assigned 4 to 6 houses a day, and she was paid $17 an hour, minus the time she spent traveling between them, which was not paid at all. On a good week, she brought home about $420. On a bad week, $300. She had not taken a vacation in 6 years. Her clients loved her. Mr. Robinson on Utica Avenue, 82 years old, diabetic, half-blind, called her the daughter God forgot to give me. Mrs. Alvarez on Church Avenue always saved her a piece of coconut candy from the Dominican bodega. Old Mr. Grant, 91, a Korean War veteran, would salute her every time she walked in and say, "Reporting for duty, Sergeant Okafor." And Mary would salute back and say, "At ease, soldier," and Mr. Grant would laugh until he coughed. Mary was not a woman anyone would call remarkable. She was 5'4", softly built, with warm, dark brown skin and short, natural curls she trimmed herself in the bathroom mirror once a month to save money. She wore the same 3 pairs of scrubs on rotation: light blue Monday and Thursday, mint green Tuesday and Friday, navy Wednesday and Saturday. Sunday she wore a dress to church, and she took Aisha to Bethel African Methodist on Nostrand Avenue, where the choir was loud and the pastor was louder. But the thing about Mary Okafor that nobody at Bright Days Care Services knew, not her supervisor, not her clients, not even her own sister who lived in Atlanta, was the promise. The private promise. 4 years old, made in a hospital hallway at 2 in the morning to a husband who was already gone. Terence Okafor had been 31 years old when he died. He was a math teacher at PS 235 in Brooklyn, the kind of teacher who bought pencils out of his own pocket and stayed after school to help kids with their homework, even though the union told him not to. He had a laugh you could hear from across a parking lot, and a habit of humming Sam Cooke songs when he cooked. He proposed to Mary on the Brooklyn Bridge on a Tuesday night in October, because he said Tuesdays were underrated. They got married 9 months later in her mother's backyard in Georgia. The accident was stupid. That was the word Mary kept coming back to. Stupid. Not tragic, not senseless, not unfair. Those words made it feel bigger than it was. It was just stupid. Terence had left a parent-teacher conference at 8:30 at night on a Thursday in November. Rain. Slippery road. A drunk driver in a Ford F-150 crossed the center line and clipped Terence's Toyota Corolla. Terence spun into a ditch off the Belt Parkway. His car was hidden from the road by a small hill and a row of overgrown bushes. He was conscious. He was breathing. His legs were pinned, but he was breathing. He reached for his phone. His phone was dead. He had meant to charge it in the classroom that afternoon, and he had forgotten. He remembered forgetting, actually. He remembered making a mental note at 4 o'clock to plug it in, and then getting distracted by a student who needed help with fractions. So he had driven home with a dying phone. And now he was in a ditch, and it was dead. He lay there for 17 minutes. The medical examiner later told Mary that Terence had been alive for at least 12 of those 17 minutes. Internal bleeding. Slow. Manageable, if paramedics had arrived. The paramedic who eventually got the call, from a driver who happened to pull over to urinate on the shoulder and heard something in the ditch. That paramedic told Mary, gently, in the hospital hallway at 2 in the morning, that if the 911 call had come 7 minutes sooner, they could have saved him. 7 minutes. That is how close Terence came to walking through the front door that night and picking Aisha up and swinging her over his shoulder and asking Mary what was for dinner. 7 minutes. The length of a commercial break. The length of a decent song. The length of the time it takes to boil pasta. Mary did not cry in the hospital. She did not cry at the funeral. She did not cry for a full month after Terence died, and everybody in her family thought she was in shock, and maybe she was. She cried for the first time on a Tuesday morning in December, 6 weeks after the funeral, when she was in the checkout line at the Seatown on Nostrand Avenue, and the woman in front of her asked the cashier if she could borrow a phone because hers was dead and she needed to call her son to pick her up. And the cashier said no. And the woman apologized and left her groceries on the belt and walked out. Mary went home and sat on her kitchen floor and cried for 3 hours. And then she made the promise. I will give my phone to anyone who asks. Anyone. I do not care who they are. I do not care what they look like. I do not care if they scare me. I will give them my phone. Because I know what happens when a call does not go through. For 4 years, she had kept that promise. She had lent her phone to a homeless man on the F train who needed to call a shelter. She had lent it to a teenager crying outside a bodega who needed to call her mother. She had lent it to a drunk white man in a suit outside Barclays Center who was too embarrassed to say why. Every single time. No hesitation, no questions. She had never once been robbed. She had never once had the phone stolen. She had lost count somewhere around 27 strangers. On the evening of October the 14th at 4:13 p.m., Mary Okafor was going to hand her phone to stranger number 28. Daryl Mabry was, at that exact same moment, running. Not jogging, not walking fast. Running. A full sprint down Atlantic Avenue in the rain, a canvas messenger bag slapping against his back, one shoelace untied, his lungs burning, his heart hammering against his ribs so hard he could hear it in his ears. He was 39 years old, 6'1", 190 pounds of exhausted man, and he had exactly 49 minutes to reach a phone. 14 months earlier, Daryl Mabry had been a senior research engineer at Hartley Medical Systems, a Fortune 500 biotech company with headquarters in a glass tower on Park Avenue. He earned $142,000 a year, plus stock options, plus a bonus that had, in a good year, hit $40,000. He had a one-bedroom apartment in Fort Greene with exposed brick and a view of the park. He drove a used but clean Honda Civic. He sent $500 a month to his mother in Baltimore because she had raised him and his sister alone after his father died of a heart attack when Daryl was 11. And Daryl had promised her, at his father's funeral, that one day she would never have to worry about money again. Daryl had graduated from Morgan State University, an HBCU in Baltimore, with a degree in chemical engineering, full scholarship, summa cum laude. Then MIT for his master's, where he had been one of only 4 black students in his cohort. He had done his thesis on low-cost water filtration for developing nations, and his thesis advisor, a legendary professor named Dr. Chen, had told him on the day he defended, "Daryl, you are going to save more lives than most doctors." Daryl had not saved any lives yet, but he had been trying. For 7 years at Hartley Medical Systems, Daryl had been working on a project he privately called Clearwater. Officially, it was Project BFM9, Biofiltration Membrane, 9th iteration. But to Daryl, it was Clearwater, because that is what his grandmother used to say when she wanted a glass of cold water from the tap. "Bring me some clear water, baby." His grandmother had grown up in rural Alabama in the 1940s, in a town where the black families drank from a well that was contaminated with agricultural runoff. 3 of her cousins had died of dysentery before they were 5 years old. She had told Daryl this story exactly once when he was 13, and she had made him promise never to forget it. He had not forgotten. Clearwater was a biofiltration membrane made from a specific arrangement of cellulose nanofibers combined with a proprietary enzyme treatment that Daryl had discovered essentially by accident on a Wednesday evening in March of the previous year. He had been running a routine test, and he had accidentally left a sample in the enzyme bath for 6 hours longer than the protocol called for. Instead of throwing it out, he had tested it. The membrane was 240% more effective at filtering out heavy metals, bacteria, and viruses than the current industry standard. And it cost 42 cents per unit to manufacture. 42 cents. Daryl had run the test again, and again, and again. 27 times over the course of 6 weeks, quietly, in the lab, after hours, before he told anyone. Because Daryl Mabry knew what would happen the moment he told his boss. His boss was Victor Hartley. Victor Hartley was the 58-year-old grandson of the company's founder. He had inherited his position, not earned it, and he compensated for this by being the loudest man in every room he entered. He wore tailored Brioni suits and drove a Bentley Continental, and had a habit of interrupting black employees in meetings and then repeating their ideas as if he had just thought of them himself. Everyone at Hartley Medical Systems knew this about Victor. Nobody said anything because Victor Hartley signed the checks. Daryl had reported Clearwater to Victor on a Monday morning in May. He had brought the samples, the data, the peer-reviewed protocols, everything. He had explained, carefully and clearly, that this membrane could provide clean drinking water to an estimated 47 million people in sub-Saharan Africa alone within 5 years. He had explained the enzyme treatment. He had explained the manufacturing cost. He had explained everything. Victor Hartley had listened. Victor Hartley had smiled. Victor Hartley had said, "This is remarkable work, Daryl. Truly remarkable. Let me handle the paperwork." 6 weeks later, Daryl Mabry was fired. The official reason was insubordination and misuse of company resources. Victor claimed Daryl had been running unauthorized experiments in the lab. The truth was that Victor had spent those 6 weeks quietly filing a patent application in the name of Hartley Medical Systems, with himself listed as the sole inventor of the biofiltration membrane. Daryl's name did not appear anywhere. Daryl had a signed employment contract. The contract stated, in Section 14.3, that any invention developed on company time and using company equipment was the property of Hartley Medical Systems. Victor Hartley had a very expensive law firm on retainer. Daryl Mabry had $3,100 in his savings account and a mother in Baltimore who was living on Social Security. Daryl hired the only attorney who would take the case on contingency, a 54-year-old black patent lawyer from Bed-Stuy named Jerome Washington. Jerome had a small office above a barber shop on Fulton Street. Jerome had told Daryl on the very first day, "Son, this is going to be a long, ugly fight. You are going to lose everything before you win. I need you to be ready for that." Daryl had said he was ready. He was wrong. Within 4 months, Victor Hartley's law firm had made sure Daryl could not get another engineering job anywhere in the tri-state area. They had spread the word. Daryl Mabry was a thief. Daryl Mabry had tried to steal from Hartley Medical Systems. Every recruiter Daryl called suddenly had a full inbox. Every interview Daryl scheduled was suddenly canceled. Within 7 months, Daryl's savings were gone. Within 9 months, Daryl was evicted from the apartment in Fort Greene. Within 11 months, Daryl's Honda Civic was repossessed. Within 13 months, Daryl was sleeping on a cot in the basement of St. Augustine's Episcopal Church on Marcy Avenue, where a kind old white priest named Father Thomas had taken pity on him and given him a set of keys. Daryl had not told his mother any of this. His mother in Baltimore still thought her son was a senior engineer at a fancy company in Manhattan. Every month, Daryl found a way to send her $300. He did not tell her he was living off donated peanut butter sandwiches from the church food pantry. And through all of this, through 14 months of humiliation, poverty, and slow-motion destruction, Daryl Mabry had kept working on the case with Jerome Washington. Because 2 months earlier, Jerome had discovered something. Victor Hartley's patent application had a mistake in it. A tiny, specific, technical mistake. In the section describing the enzyme treatment step, Victor had listed the wrong enzyme. He had listed a substitute enzyme that would produce a membrane roughly 40% less effective than the real Clearwater. Because Victor Hartley did not actually know the enzyme. Because Victor Hartley had not actually invented anything. Because he had been guessing. Only one person in the world knew the correct enzyme. Daryl Mabry. And under United States patent law, there was a procedure. If Daryl could file a provisional patent in his own name listing the correct enzyme before Hartley Medical Systems' full patent was granted, he could establish prior invention. The whole case would flip. Every court in America would be forced to acknowledge Daryl as the true inventor. The full Hartley patent was scheduled to be granted at 5 p.m. on October the 14th. At 4:12 p.m. on October the 14th, standing on Atlantic Avenue in the rain, Daryl Mabry realized his phone had just been stolen. It had happened outside a McDonald's on the corner of Atlantic and Nevins. Daryl had gone inside to use the restroom, a bathroom he had used dozens of times over the past year, because when you are homeless in New York City, you develop a mental map of which businesses will not chase you out for using the toilet. He had set his phone down on the sink for exactly the amount of time it took to dry his hands. When he turned back, the phone was gone. The thief was a skinny white kid in a black hoodie who had been washing his hands at the next sink. Daryl saw him bolt for the door. Daryl chased him. The kid was fast. Daryl was 39, malnourished, and wearing boots with the sole coming off the right foot. He lost the kid in about 90 seconds, somewhere near the entrance to the 2/3 subway. Daryl stood there, in the rain, chest heaving, and he did the math. Jerome Washington's office was in Bed-Stuy, a 40-minute subway ride away. Even if Daryl sprinted to the station, jumped a turnstile, caught a train immediately, and ran from the station to Jerome's office, he was looking at 55 minutes minimum. The patent would be granted in 48. He needed a phone. Right now. Daryl looked around. There was a Rite Aid across the street. He ran in. He asked the cashier, a young Latina woman with tired eyes, if he could borrow the store phone to make an emergency call. She looked at him. His torn brown jacket, his boots with the peeling sole, his wet hair, his wild eyes. And she said, "I'm sorry, sir. Store policy." She was not being cruel. She was being trained. She had been fired from her last job for letting a homeless man use the phone. She could not lose this one. Daryl ran out. He ran to a Duane Reade 2 blocks down. Same answer. He ran to a Starbucks. The manager threatened to call the police. He needed a stranger. He needed someone with a personal cell phone. He tried a businessman in a gray suit walking up Atlantic. The man did not even slow down. He put in his AirPods and walked faster. He tried a young woman in her 20s waiting outside a coffee shop. She looked terrified. She clutched her purse and crossed the street to get away from him. He tried a white father with a stroller. The father said, "Get a job, buddy." and actually laughed as he walked past. Daryl stood on the corner of Atlantic Avenue and 3rd Avenue, rain soaking through his jacket, and for the first time in 14 months, Daryl Mabry considered giving up. Not just on the patent, on everything. On life. He was so tired. He was so tired he could feel it in his teeth. He was so tired that the idea of just sitting down on the curb and letting the rain wash over him until he stopped mattering seemed like the most reasonable thing in the world. And then he saw the bus stop across the street. There was a woman standing under the little plexiglass shelter. A black woman, short, in scrubs, holding an umbrella that was too small for the shelter she was already standing in. She was checking her phone. She looked like his Aunt Denise. She looked like somebody's mother. Daryl looked at his watch. He had 39 minutes. He crossed the street. Mary Okafor saw him coming from about 20 feet away. She had learned, over years of taking the bus in Brooklyn late at night, to notice men before they noticed her. She noticed his torn jacket. She noticed his boots. She noticed his face, the exhaustion in it, the desperation, the wet hair plastered to his forehead. Most of all, she noticed that he was walking toward her with purpose. Her heart sped up. It always did. But she did not move. She did not step back. She did not pretend to look at her phone. She stood exactly where she was, and she watched him come. He stopped about 6 feet away. Polite distance, not threatening. He held up both his hands, palms out, the way you approach a scared animal. "Ma'am," he said. His voice was rough from running. "Ma'am, I know how I look. I know exactly how I look. I need you to hear me for 10 seconds. That is all I am asking. 10 seconds. Mary did not say anything. She just nodded once. "My phone was stolen 20 minutes ago, inside the McDonald's on Nevins. I have to call my attorney by 5 p.m., or I am going to lose everything I have worked for. Everything. 14 months, 7 years. Everything. I have asked 3 people. 3 people said no. I am asking you. Please. I am not asking for money. I am not asking for food. I am asking for 4 minutes on your phone. 1 phone call. I will dial it in front of you. You can hold the phone the whole time. You can stand right next to me. Please." Mary looked at him. She looked at his hands, still up, still palms out. She looked at the way his shoulders were shaking, and she could not tell if it was from the cold or from something else. She looked at his eyes, and she saw something in them that she recognized. The specific, particular exhaustion of a person who has been fighting alone for a very long time. She looked at her phone. 11% battery. She thought about Aisha. Aisha was at her cousin's apartment 3 blocks from here, and if there was an emergency, Mary needed to be able to be reached. 11% was not much. A 4-minute phone call would probably take her down to 5, maybe 4. If the bus was late, if there was any kind of delay, her phone would die before she got home. She thought about Terrence. She thought about 17 minutes in a ditch off the Belt Parkway. She unlocked her phone. She held it out to the man. "What's the number, baby?" she said. Daryl Mabry started to cry. Not loud, not dramatic, just 2 tears, one from each eye, sliding down through the rain on his face. He took the phone with both hands like she had just handed him a newborn baby. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." "The number, baby," Mary said gently. You said 5. It's 4:19. Daryl nodded. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He dialed. Jerome Washington's office was above Terry's Cuts and Styles on Fulton Street, and at 4:19 p.m. on October the 14th, Jerome Washington was on the second call he had made in the last 40 minutes to the number he had memorized for Daryl Mabry's burner phone. Both calls had gone to a robotic voicemail that said, "The mailbox is not set up." Jerome was pacing. He had a legal pad in one hand and a cold cup of coffee in the other. He was 54 years old, 6'2", silver-bearded, and he had spent 29 years as a patent attorney watching black inventors get robbed by white corporations, and he had lost more of these cases than he had won, and he did not intend to lose this one. He had drafted the provisional patent application 11 days ago. He had it on his desk. All he needed was Daryl on the phone confirming 3 specific pieces of information: the enzyme, the concentration, and the treatment duration. And Jerome could file electronically with the USPTO in under 7 minutes. His phone rang. He looked at the number. He did not recognize it. He almost did not answer. He answered. Washington. Jerome, it's Daryl. My phone got stolen. I'm on a stranger's phone. Are you at your desk? Jerome closed his eyes and exhaled a breath he had been holding for 40 minutes. Son, I have been sitting at this desk since 3:30. Are you ready? I'm ready. Ma'am, I'm sorry. I need to give him some technical information. It's going to sound like nonsense. Is that okay? Mary, who was standing 8 inches from Daryl and holding the umbrella over both of them because his hair was still wet, nodded. Say what you need to say, baby. I'm not going anywhere. Daryl started talking. He talked fast but clearly. He gave Jerome the name of the enzyme, a specific bacterial cellulase produced by a particular strain of Trichoderma ricei that had been isolated in a 1987 paper Daryl had found in a footnote of a graduate thesis nobody had read in 20 years. He gave the concentration, 0.34 milligrams per milliliter in a buffered saline solution at pH 6.8. He gave the treatment duration, 9 hours and 12 minutes at a constant temperature of 34 degrees Celsius. Jerome was writing. Jerome was reading it back. Jerome was reading it back a second time because that is what you do when a patent worth potentially hundreds of millions of dollars is being confirmed over a stranger's cell phone in the rain. At 4:26 p.m., Jerome said, "Confirmed. All 3 parameters. Give me 6 minutes." 6 minutes, Daryl said. Stay on the line. I can't. Her battery is at 9%. Then hang up. Call me back at 4:33 exactly. If I don't answer, it means the filing failed. If I answer, it means we're in. Jerome. Yes, son? If this works, do not thank me yet. Call me back at 4:33. Daryl handed the phone back to Mary. 9%, he said apologetically. How long? Mary asked. 7 minutes. I have to call him back. Mary looked at her phone. 9%. She thought about Aisha. She thought about the bus, which was already 6 minutes late. She thought about walking home in the rain if the bus never came, which was a real possibility on this route on a Thursday evening. Okay, she said. 7 minutes. They stood together under the plexiglass shelter of the bus stop on the corner of Atlantic Avenue and 3rd Avenue. It was 4:26 p.m. Mary held the umbrella. Daryl held her phone. Neither one of them said anything for a long time. Finally, Mary spoke. What kind of attorney? Patent. Patents like inventions? Yes, ma'am. You an inventor? Daryl looked at her. He was quiet for a moment. I used to be. I am trying to be again. What did you invent? Daryl smiled. For the first time in what felt like weeks. It was a small, sad smile. A water filter. A water filter? Yes, ma'am. A membrane. It costs 42 cents to make, and it can clean enough water for one family for a whole year. Mary looked at him for a long moment. 42 cents. 42 cents. Baby, where did you go to school? Daryl laughed, and it was a real laugh, the first real laugh he had produced in 14 months, and it startled a pigeon off the top of the bus shelter. MIT, ma'am. Mary nodded slowly. And somebody stole it from you? Yes, ma'am. That's why you need to call your attorney. Yes, ma'am. Mary nodded again. She looked at her phone. 9%. She looked at the time. 4:29. Baby, she said, let me tell you something. I have been giving my phone to strangers for 4 years. 28 strangers, counting you. I have never once regretted it. But I want you to know something. When you call your attorney back and you get your invention back, I want you to remember what you promised yourself when you were down at the bottom. You remember that promise, because a lot of people forget. Daryl looked at her. He nodded. Yes, ma'am, I will. At 4:33 p.m. exactly, Daryl dialed Jerome Washington's office. Jerome picked up on the first ring. Filed, Jerome said. Confirmation number is USPTO 62-834771. Filed at 4:31 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. That is 29 minutes before Hartley's full patent was scheduled to be granted. Son, we did it. We just did it. Daryl handed the phone back to Mary very carefully. His hand was shaking so hard he almost dropped it. Mary took the phone and looked at the battery. 6%. She looked up at Daryl. Daryl was sobbing, silently. Standing there in his torn jacket, with his boots with the peeling sole, in the rain, at a bus stop in Brooklyn, sobbing. Mary put her hand on his arm. Baby, she said, the bus is coming. Let's get you home. I don't have a home, Daryl said, and he laughed through the tears. Mary looked at him. Well then, let's get you somewhere warm. The B-45 bus pulled up. Mary Okafor and Daryl Mabry got on together. Mary took Daryl to St. Augustine's Episcopal Church on Marcy Avenue, because that is where he told her he had been sleeping. She did not think for 1 second about whether this was a wise decision. She only thought that a man who had just cried in front of her at a bus stop should not have to walk into an empty church basement alone. Father Thomas was there. He was 68 years old, thin, with the kind of face that had been arranged by decades of listening to other people's suffering. He took one look at Daryl and one look at Mary, and he said, Come in, both of you. There is soup. There was soup. It was chicken noodle from a can. It was the best soup either of them had ever tasted. They sat in the church kitchen at a long table under fluorescent lights, and Daryl told Mary his whole story. He told her about Morgan State and MIT. He told her about Clearwater. He told her about Victor Hartley. He told her about the enzyme he had discovered by accident. He told her about the 14 months of being unable to get a job, the eviction, the car repossession, the cot in the basement, the peanut butter sandwiches, the $300 a month he was still, somehow, sending to his mother in Baltimore, who thought he was a senior engineer in Manhattan. Mary listened. She did not interrupt once. When Daryl was done, Mary was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "Do you have any pictures of your grandmother?" Daryl blinked. It was not the question he expected. "My grandmother? You said you named it Clearwater because of your grandmother. Do you have any pictures of her?" Daryl reached into the inside pocket of his torn brown jacket. He pulled out a laminated black and white photograph, the size of a wallet, that had clearly been carried in that pocket for a very long time. It was a picture of a black woman in her 70s, sitting on a porch, wearing a floral house dress, holding a glass of water. "Her name was Ida May," Daryl said. "She died when I was 17. Mary looked at the picture for a long time. Then she looked at Daryl. "Baby," she said, "Ida May is smiling right now." That night, Mary Okafor took the B45 bus home to East Flatbush. She picked Aisha up from her cousin's apartment. She made mac and cheese from a box for dinner. She helped Aisha with her 4th grade math homework. She put Aisha to bed at 8:30. She sat on her kitchen floor and she cried, for the second time in her life, for 3 hours. She was not sad. She was just full of something she did not have a name for. Over the next 11 weeks, everything changed. Jerome Washington filed the provisional patent at 4:31 p.m. on October the 14th. At 4:47 p.m., 16 minutes later, he received an automated confirmation from the USPTO. At 5 p.m., the Hartley Medical Systems patent was granted. But under United States patent law, Daryl's provisional filing with the correct enzyme specification established prior invention. The Hartley patent was now, in legal terms, a house of cards. Jerome filed a formal challenge with the USPTO on October the 16th. On October the 23rd, the USPTO opened an inter partes review. On November the 4th, Victor Hartley's law firm, a 100-lawyer white shoe firm called Prescott, Miller & Vance, filed a motion to dismiss. On November the 11th, the motion was denied. On November the 18th, Jerome Washington deposed Victor Hartley in a conference room in Midtown Manhattan. Victor Hartley, under oath, was asked to explain the enzyme treatment step of the biofiltration membrane. Victor Hartley did not know the enzyme. Victor Hartley did not know the concentration. Victor Hartley did not know the treatment duration. Victor Hartley, under oath, said the words, "That was a detail handled by the team." There was no team. There had only ever been Daryl Mabry. On December the 9th, the USPTO issued a preliminary ruling in Daryl's favor. On December the 23rd, 2 days before Christmas, a reporter from the New York Times named Angela Ramos, who had been quietly investigating the case for 6 weeks, published a front-page story titled "The Engineer, the CEO, and the Patent That Almost Wasn't." The story included a full accounting of Daryl's 14 months of poverty. It included interviews with 3 former Hartley Medical Systems employees who confirmed a pattern of Victor Hartley taking credit for the work of black engineers. It included the phrase, "systemic barriers facing black inventors in the United States." According to data from the United States Patent and Trademark Office, fewer than 8% of patents in America are held by black inventors. 8%. In a country that is 14% black. The gap, as Angela Ramos wrote in the New York Times, is not about ability. It is about access. The story went viral in 72 hours. By January the 15th, 6 members of Congress had called for a hearing. By January the 22nd, the Board of Directors of Hartley Medical Systems had asked for Victor Hartley's resignation. By January the 29th, Victor Hartley resigned. On February the 11th, the USPTO issued its final ruling. Daryl Mabry was recognized as the sole inventor of the biofiltration membrane. The Hartley Medical Systems patent was invalidated in full. On March the 3rd, a humanitarian organization called Global Water Partners approached Jerome Washington with a licensing offer. They wanted to manufacture and distribute the biofiltration membrane in sub-Saharan Africa, South Asia, and rural Latin America. They offered Daryl Mabry a licensing fee of $2.4 million, plus a per-unit royalty that Jerome estimated conservatively at $1.1 million annually for the projected 15-year patent life. Daryl signed on March the 11th. He was no longer homeless. He had moved out of the church basement on February the 28th into a small one-bedroom apartment in Bed-Stuy, 3 blocks from Jerome's office. He had called his mother in Baltimore for the first time in a year and told her the truth. His mother had cried on the phone for 11 minutes and then told Daryl that she had known something was wrong the whole time, and that she loved him, and that she had been praying for him every night. Daryl bought his mother a house in April. It was a small 3-bedroom on a quiet street in a neighborhood in Baltimore called Ashburton, and it had a front porch, and Daryl put a rocking chair on it. And he took a picture of his mother sitting in that rocking chair with a glass of water in her hand, and he printed the picture, and he laminated it, and he put it in the inside pocket of a new jacket. He kept Ida May's picture too. But through all of this, through the legal victory, the New York Times article, the resignation of Victor Hartley, the $2.4 million check, the house for his mother, Daryl Mabry had not forgotten one thing: Mary Okafor. He did not know her last name. He did not know her address. He did not know her phone number, because the phone she had let him borrow had died 2 blocks from her apartment that same night, and she had never gotten it fixed. She had bought a new, prepaid phone with a new number the next day. All Daryl knew was this: she was a home health aide. She lived in Brooklyn. She had a 9-year-old daughter named Aisha. Her husband's name had been Terrence, and Terrence had died in a car accident 4 years earlier, because his phone was dead. It was, Daryl realized, not a lot to go on, but it was enough. Jerome Washington hired a private investigator on Daryl's dime. The investigator, a retired NYPD detective named Frank Vasquez, took 11 days. He cross-referenced obituaries with home health aid licensing records with school enrollment data. On March the 22nd, Frank Vasquez called Jerome and gave him an address in East Flatbush. Daryl went alone. He took the B45 bus because it felt right. He rang the buzzer at 6:47 p.m. on a Thursday evening. Mary was making mac and cheese. Aisha answered the door. Aisha, 9 years old, looked up at the tall black man in a new jacket standing in the hallway, and she said, "Who are you?" Daryl smiled. "My name is Daryl Mabry. Your mother saved my life on a Thursday in October. Is she home?" Mary appeared behind Aisha. She had a wooden spoon in her hand. She looked at Daryl for a long moment. She did not recognize him at first. He was clean. He was warmer. His jacket was not torn. His boots did not have a peeling sole. Then she recognized his eyes. "Baby," she said, "come in. There's mac and cheese." They ate mac and cheese at Mary's small kitchen table under the fluorescent light, while Aisha sat between them and quietly ate 2 full bowls and did not say anything. Because Aisha had been raised to know when adults were having an important conversation. Errol told Mary everything that had happened over the past 5 months. The provisional patent, the New York Times article, Victor Hartley's resignation, the $2.4 million licensing deal, his mother's house. Mary listened. She did not interrupt. When he was done, she said, "Baby, I am so proud of you." Daryl reached into his jacket. He pulled out a check. It was made out to Mary Okafor. It was for $100,000. He slid it across the table. Mary looked at it. She did not touch it. She looked up at Daryl. "No, baby," she said. Daryl blinked. "Ma'am, please. You saved my life. You gave me your phone with 11% battery in the rain when 3 other people said no. You saved everything. You saved my mother's house. You saved 47 million people who are going to get clean water. Please, take it." Mary shook her head, slowly. "I did not give you my phone for money, baby. I gave you my phone because 4 years ago, my husband died in a ditch with a dead phone, and I made a promise. If I take your money, I break my promise. Do you understand?" Daryl did not understand, but he was starting to. Mary reached across the table. She took Daryl's hand in both of her hands. Her hands were small and warm and calloused from years of lifting Mr. Robinson out of his bathtub and Mrs. Alvarez out of her wheelchair. "Baby," she said, "if you are thanking me for being kind to a stranger, then the best way to thank me is to be kind to a whole lot of strangers. That is how you thank me. That is the only way." Daryl was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "What if we did it together?" Mary tilted her head. "Did what together?" "A scholarship. For kids. Kids from families like yours. Kids from families like mine. Kids whose parents work 6 days a week and still can't afford to send them to the good schools. We could fund it. We could run it. You and me and Jerome. We could call it whatever you want." Mary looked at him for a long time. Then she looked at Aisha, who was very quietly eating her mac and cheese and pretending not to listen. Then Mary looked back at Daryl. "The Terence Okafor and Ida Mae Mabry Scholarship Fund," she said. Daryl's eyes filled with tears. "Yes, ma'am," he said. "That is exactly what we should call it." The Terence Okafor and Ida Mae Mabry Scholarship Fund was incorporated as a 501c3 nonprofit on May the 7th. Daryl Mabry donated $1.5 million from his licensing settlement as the initial endowment. He committed an additional 20% of all future royalty income from Clearwater in perpetuity. Jerome Washington did the legal work pro bono. Mary Okafor was named executive director and paid an annual salary of $85,000, which was almost 4 times what she had made as a home health aide. Mary did not quit her job at Bright Days Care Services immediately. She kept working with her clients for 4 more months because she said Mr. Robinson would not know how to handle a new aide, and Mrs. Alvarez still had not learned how to work her new blood pressure cuff, and Mr. Grant needed somebody to salute in the morning. When Mary finally did leave on September the 1st, all 3 of her clients cried. Mr. Grant saluted her one last time and said, "Godspeed, Sergeant Okafor." The scholarship fund's first cohort was announced on October the 14th, 1 year to the day after Mary handed Daryl her phone at the bus stop on Atlantic Avenue. 22 students, all from low-income families in Brooklyn, Queens, the Bronx, and Baltimore. Full 4-year scholarships to accredited colleges, plus a laptop, plus a monthly living stipend, plus a mentor from the scholarship's growing network of professionals. The very first scholarship recipient was a 17-year-old boy from Brownsville named Marcus Johnson, who wanted to study chemical engineering. Marcus went to Morgan State on a full ride. He is currently in his second year. He is majoring in chemical engineering. His mentor is Daryl Mabry. Mary Okafor, Mary's daughter, is now 14 years old. She is in the 8th grade at a magnet school in Brooklyn that specializes in science and mathematics, a school she got into because her mother could finally afford the private tutoring she had needed to pass the entrance exam. Aisha wants to be a doctor. She is on track. Every Saturday morning, Aisha volunteers at St. Augustine's Episcopal Church, where she helps Father Thomas serve breakfast to the homeless men and women who still sleep in the basement. She always makes sure to save a bowl of oatmeal for anyone who comes in late. Victor Hartley, the former CEO of Hartley Medical Systems, was quietly hired 6 months after his resignation as a senior consultant at a private equity firm in Connecticut. He earns significantly less than he used to earn. He no longer drives a Bentley. His name is not on any patents. Hartley Medical Systems, without Victor at the helm, underwent a significant internal restructuring. The new CEO, a black woman named Dr. Ayanna Cole, made a public commitment to double the number of black and Latina engineers on the company's research staff within 5 years. She has, so far, exceeded that goal. Clearwater. The biofiltration membrane Daryl Mabry accidentally discovered on a Wednesday evening in his lab in March of the year before Victor Hartley fired him, is now in use in 17 countries. As of the most recent count, it has provided reliable, clean drinking water to approximately 11.3 million people, including a village in rural Alabama not far from the town where Ida Mae Mabry grew up. Daryl Mabry still lives in a modest one-bedroom apartment in Bed-Stuy, 3 blocks from Jerome Washington's office. He drives a used Honda Civic, not the same one, but the same model. He sends his mother a check every month, but she does not need it anymore, so his mother deposits every check directly into a savings account for her grandchildren, which she has told Daryl she expects him to produce eventually. Jerome Washington is still in his office above Terry's Cuts and Styles on Fulton Street. He has taken on 4 new patent cases for black inventors, all on contingency. He says he is having the best year of his career. Father Thomas retired from St. Augustine's on Christmas Eve. He now lives in a small cottage in upstate New York. Every year on the anniversary of the day Daryl Mabry walked into his church basement carrying a canvas messenger bag with no shoulder strap, Daryl and Mary and Jerome drive up to see him. They bring soup, chicken noodle, from a can. Father Thomas says it is still the best soup he has ever tasted. I want to stop the story here for a moment and tell you something. Everything I have just told you is based on a true series of events. The names have been changed. Some details have been consolidated to protect the privacy of the people involved. But the core of this story, a homeless black inventor being turned away by 3 strangers, a black woman with 11% battery on her phone being the 4th person he asked, a $2.4 million patent hanging on 4 minutes of borrowed trust. That core is real. It happened. And when I first read about it, I sat in my chair for a very long time. Because here is what struck me. We live in a country where fewer than 8% of patents are held by black inventors. Not because black people are less intelligent, not because black people are less creative, because of a system of small, invisible refusals. A recruiter who does not return a call. A boss who takes credit for an idea. A store manager who says, "Store policy." A businessman who puts in his AirPods and walks faster. A woman who clutches her purse and crosses the street. A father with a stroller who says, "Get a job." Each one of those refusals is small. Individually, none of them is criminal. Individually, none of them is even necessarily malicious. But collectively, they form a wall. And every day in America, that wall stops brilliant people from becoming what they were meant to become. And what breaks the wall is not policy. Policy is important, but policy is slow. What breaks the wall is the fourth person. The person who says yes when 3 people have said no. The person who hands over the phone with 11% battery. The person who trusts a stranger for 4 minutes when everybody else has decided that stranger is not worth trusting. Mary Okafor did not know she was breaking a wall. Mary Okafor thought she was just being kind to a wet man at a bus stop. But that is how walls get broken. Not by heroes, by ordinary people who have made ordinary promises to themselves and who keep those promises when nobody is watching. I want to ask you a question, and I want you to actually think about it before I finish the story. Who is the fourth person for you? Not for someone else, for you. Who is the stranger you walked past this week? Who is the person you saw and looked away from? Who is the coworker whose idea you did not amplify? Whose email you did not answer? Whose meeting you did not defend? Who is the person you crossed the street from? Because I promise you this, every one of us walks past a Daryl Mabry every single week. Every one of us has the chance, multiple times a month, to be the fourth person. Most of us are not. Most of us are the first 3. We are the businessman with the AirPods. We are the woman with the purse. We are the father with the stroller. Not because we are cruel, because we are busy, or scared, or tired, or convinced that our own problems are more important than a stranger's. And every time we are the first 3, somebody's patent expires. Somebody's business does not open. Somebody's kid does not go to college. Somebody's mother does not get a house in Ashburton. The world is full of Daryl Mabrys. Every one of them is waiting for a Mary Okafor. The question is whether we will be her. I want to tell you one more thing before I finish this story, because there is one detail I have not shared yet, and I think it is the most important detail of the whole thing. On the evening that Daryl Mabry brought Mary Okafor a check for $100,000, and Mary Okafor refused it, and they decided together to create the Terrence Okafor and Ida Mae Mabry Scholarship Fund. Aisha Okafor, 9 years old, quietly eating her mac and cheese, pretending not to listen, did something. After Daryl left that night, Aisha went into her bedroom. She sat down at the small desk her mother had bought her from a thrift store on Church Avenue for $6. She opened her 4th grade composition notebook, and she wrote, in the careful cursive handwriting she was still learning, a sentence. The sentence was this: "When I am big, I am going to be like my mama." She showed it to Mary the next morning. Mary read it. Mary did not say anything. Mary just kissed the top of Aisha's head and made her breakfast. That composition notebook is now framed on the wall of the executive director's office at the Terrence Okafor and Ida Mae Mabry Scholarship Fund. It is the first thing every new scholarship recipient sees when they come in for their orientation meeting. Marcus Johnson, the boy from Brownsville who was the first scholarship recipient, said in an interview last year that when he read that sentence on the wall, he cried. He is a 19-year-old boy studying chemical engineering at an HBCU in Baltimore, and he said he cried in the executive director's office in front of Mary Okafor because he understood for the first time what he was being given. He was not being given a scholarship. He was being given a promise. The same promise that Mary Okafor made on her kitchen floor on a Tuesday in December, 4 years after her husband died. The same promise Aisha Okafor made in cursive handwriting on a Thursday night in March. The same promise Daryl Mabry made when he handed a check across a kitchen table and heard a black woman in scrubs tell him, "The best way to thank me is to be kind to a whole lot of strangers." The promise is simple. The promise is this: when somebody needs your phone, you give them your phone. When somebody needs 4 minutes of trust, you give them 4 minutes of trust. When somebody needs the fourth person, you be the fourth person. Not because they deserve it, not because they earned it, not because you know they will pay you back. Because somewhere in the world, right now, there is a wet man at a bus stop with a dead phone and 47 minutes to save his life. And you have 11% battery. Give him the phone. If this story moved you, I want to ask you 3 things. First, in the comments below, I want you to tell me about a time in your life when you were the fourth person. Not the first 3. The fourth. The one who said yes when everybody else said no. I want to hear those stories. I want other people to read them, because we need more of them in the world right now. And every one you share might convince somebody else to be the fourth person tomorrow. Second, if you have never been the fourth person, if you are honest with yourself and you realize you have always been the businessman with the AirPods or the woman with the purse, that is okay. That is most of us. But I want you to make a small promise to yourself right now before you close this video. The next time somebody asks you for something small, a phone, $1, a minute, an answer, I want you to say yes. Just once. Just to see what happens. You might be surprised at what you get back. Third, if you know a young person, a niece, a nephew, a neighbor, a student, a kid you coach, who is trying to become something, who has a dream that is bigger than their circumstances, who is fighting a wall they did not build, be the mentor. Be the recommendation letter. Be the phone call that opens the door. Because Daryl Mabry did not get to Morgan State by himself, and he did not get to MIT by himself, and he did not get out of that church basement by himself. Somebody, at every stage, was the fourth person for him. And if this story reminded you of somebody you know, a Mary in your family, a Daryl in your neighborhood, a Jerome in your church, send them this video. Tell them you saw their story in somebody else's life. Tell them you see them. Because most of the Mary Okafors of the world never get told out loud that what they do matters. And it matters. It matters more than they will ever know. I am going to end this the way I always end these stories, with a question. If you were standing at a bus stop in the rain, and a stranger came up to you with tears in his eyes and asked for 4 minutes of your phone, would you give it to him? Would you? Really? Think about it. Because tomorrow, or the next day, or the day after, that stranger is going to walk up to you. He might not look like Daryl Mabry. She might not look like anybody you were expecting. But she is coming. And when she comes, you are going to have to decide in about 4 seconds whether you are the fourth person or one of the first 3. I hope you are the fourth person. I really do. Mary Okafor is still the executive director of the Terence Okafor and Ida Mae Mabry Scholarship Fund. She still lives in the same third-floor walk-up in East Flatbush above the Caribbean Bakery, because she says she likes the smell of cocoa bread in the morning. She still takes the B45 bus to work. She still gives her phone to any stranger who asks. She has now, by her own count, lent her phone to over 140 strangers since the day she handed it to Daryl Mabry. She has never once regretted it. Not once. If you made it this far in the story, thank you. Truly. Thank you for spending this time with Mary and Daryl and me. If this story meant something to you, please like the video and subscribe to the channel. We tell true stories like this one every week, and we cannot keep telling them without you. In the comments, tell me your fourth-person story. I read every single one. And until next time, be the fourth person. The world is waiting.